Good evening and welcome to the broadcast. Here's what's topping our agenda.
Tonight, humble pie is served.
I offered my unqualified apology to the president.
Moses Kuria claims he has received death threats in the ongoing battles in Jubilee.
Also tonight,
no more tribalism!
Hugs and camaraderie among sworn foes as post-handshake questions are raised.
We reject in totality the politics of blackmail, intimidation, threats, and bloodshed.
Mbele ya Mwenyezi Mungu siku hiyo watu walivyokumbatiana ilikuwa utani ama ilikuwa ukweli?
Plus, pain persists but relief is here. More arrests as defiled Homa Bay girl is transferred to Nairobi.
And bad maize from Mozambique thrown into the furnace.
We expect the remainder of 191 containers also to follow up, maybe in the next 20 days.
NTV Tonight with Mark Masai and Smriti Vidyarthi.
Good evening, we're glad you could join us. Flora Tieno, our sign language interpreter, also welcomes you to this bulletin.
Now, since coming into the political limelight, Gatundu's South Member of Parliament, Moses Kuria, has developed a taste for poking the soft underbelly of his seniors.
The man with a caustic tongue took on the president in a way no other leader from the region has before, kicking off a storm that has rocked the ruling party.
Well, tonight, the outspoken MP is backpedaling and has apologized for his remarks targeting the president and voiced his support for the Building Bridges initiative.
The embattled MP now also claims his life is in danger following the political storm he stirred. NTV's Seth Olale starts us off with Moses Kuria's big U-turn.
The besieged Gatundu Member of Parliament Moses Kuria arrived at Parliament buildings seemingly unperturbed by the political storm that he had stirred. Kuria started by dismissing claims that had been building up before today that he had resigned as Gatundu South MP.
I mean, with all due respect, what kind of journalism is that? Anyway, that's how people become rich from damages. And that is for reporting.
In an apparent about face, the legislator had toned down on his tough rhetoric, apologizing to President Uhuru Kenyatta.
I offered my unqualified apology to the president for any hurt and misconception that my words may have created.
And leaders drawn from Mount Kenya over his remarks that questioned the president's development policies.
I have keenly listened to leaders like Governors Waititu, Waiguru, Kimemia, Kiraitu, and Wairia, and they are unanimous that there is visible development in their counties. I stand guided accordingly, and I cannot claim to be an authority on their counties more than them. They know better, and I apologize to them for insinuating that there is no development in their counties.
Kuria says he fully backs the unity deal between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga.
It's a very long misconception that has been created that I'm opposed to the Building Bridges initiative and the handshake. I've been very consistent in supporting the BBI, and I have traversed many parts of this country, including Kakamega, Homa Bay, and Kisumu.
His remarks kicked off a political storm, with some political protagonists closing ranks and pushing back on his claims, and those of other rebels that the president had neglected the Mount Kenya region. He now claims his life is in danger and has shared his concerns with the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti.
Details of which I have already shared with the DCI, Mr. George Kinoti, a man of intense capabilities and patriotism, and who is doing everything possible to investigate the same.
Moses Kuria's turnaround comes a day after a large section of Central Kenya leaders unanimously backed President Uhuru Kenyatta and at the same time criticized the MP over his stand. The growing rifts in the Jubilee party have largely been sparked off by Moses Kuria. With a seeming turnaround, will the noise in the divided Jubilee House tone down, or will his apology be pushed to the side even as divisions and debate rages on? Seth Olale, NTV, Parliament building.
And from this storm, there is a seismic shift in the political landscape, and women politicians from across the political aisle have now come together to preach a message of unity and are asking the country to embrace the handshake as embodied by President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga.
Kennedy Muredi now reports that the women politicians also want leaders to go easy on the divisive political rhetoric.
Tunautaka upendo, tunaitaka amani, tunaiomba amani, tunaiomba miradi twaipokea.
The songs and dances bringing together women politicians from across the political aisle signified new beginnings in the country's political sphere. A unity message that these women leaders were preaching to all Kenyans. According to them, the country had been consumed by unhelpful political debate, and they warned the waters may get murkier if there is no urgent cleanup in the country's politics.
We embrace inclusivity and reject politics that pit tribe against tribe, region against region, and party against party.
Anytime there is disunity in this nation, the people who suffer most are the women and the children. And as the women of this nation, we are tired of seeing our children being killed because of political indifferences.
They say the handshake played a pivotal role in bridging the widening gap occasioned by a bitter and disputed election and had created a conducive environment for business.
Watu walikumbatiana. Kulikuwa Mheshimiwa Rais, Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga, Mheshimiwa Naibu wa Rais William Samoei Arap Ruto na vile vile Mheshimiwa aliyekuwa makamu wa Rais Mheshimiwa Kalonzo Musyoka. Swala nitakaloliuliza ni hili: je, mbele ya Mwenyezi Mungu siku hiyo watu walivyokumbatiana ilikuwa utani ama ilikuwa ukweli?
Na sisi kama wamama wa taifa la Kenya tutatembea mpaka kule mashinani. Tuhubiri amani, tuhubiri umoja, tuhubiri maendeleo.
We are going to stand with His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, His Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga in the new path that they are leading this country in.
Tunataka vile president alisema kila eneo la nchi ipate development.
The women leaders are expected to present a petition before the Building Bridges team next week before they set out on countrywide campaigns to preach their reconciliation message. Kennedy Muredi, NTV.
Now, if you had any doubt as to the transformative power of the handshake, then the proof lies in the tongue. It has so altered the political landscape, with previously sworn critics becoming staunch defenders and friends turning into foes.
Proving true the old adage that in politics, there are no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests.
Tonight, Olive Burrows shines a light on the change of tune that a year ago would have been unthinkable.
Embrace your neighbor.
What was inconceivable immediately after the 2017 election has become commonplace. It appears that those who were once bitter enemies are on a mission to redefine the unusual. Cue the t-shirts, exit the resist attire, and in with the new embrace quote-unquote regalia. There is a new political order, and if you had any doubt, all you have to do is take the political class at their word.
We have removed our ballets as a brigade. We have removed the handshake resist ballets, and we have said from today henceforth, you will see us in this nation as women, going together, working together. We have refused the spirit of resist or even the brigades, and so now we have a movement called Embrace.
Just a year ago, who would have thought that these party stalwarts from opposite sides of the political divide would have found common ground?
We thank you because you have revived our spirits.
Then the words that came out of their mouths were stinging rebukes in the race for the presidency.
Vile watu wa Coast walikuwa wameanza na wamesema, na sisi pia kule Nyanza tutasema, na Western tutasema, na hapa Nairobi tutasema. Wao wabaki na nchi yao, na sisi tukue na nchi yetu.
The cue coming from their respective party leaders.
Mtu ya kitendawili anazunguka kuambia Wakenya ati kwa sababu Uhuru ametaja Maraga na amesema ati Maraga amefanya makosa na atamfuatilia, Si hiyo ni haki yangu?
Hii wizi ndio wa mwisho, na tutakubali wale viongozi ambao wametengenezwa na kompyuta waendelea kututawala.
These being just a sample of the barbs traded. The handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga has since turned the tables, but not without causing some disquiet among old friends for fear of being betrayed. Regardless, the newly formed allies appear undeterred.
Sisi sote tunakuunga mkono 100 chini ya 100, na yoyote ambaye atakwenda kinyume na hicho, Mwenyezi Mungu amuone mchana.
Asante. Olive Barrows, NTV.
Never a dull moment in our politics. Let's hope that newfound camaraderie does last, not for them, but for the nation. And to any outsider, the rift within the Jubilee party seems to be getting wider by the day, if rhetoric and actions by its leaders are any measure. In what's shaping up as a succession battle, the House has been divided in two.
On one hand, a team labelled Team Tanga Tanga, keen to see the Deputy President rather, succeed President Kenyatta in 2022, and on the other hand, those opposed to his ambitions. But just what ails the ruling party, and when did the rain start beating Jubilee?
NTV's Silas Apollo reports.
Many political commentators now agree on one thing, that the Jubilee party is one house standing on shaky grounds. For starters, the coalition is currently facing an internal rebellion from a section of members who have accused the leadership of betrayal. Commentators agree that the matter in contention is in fact the race to succeed President Uhuru Kenyatta. The campaigns have already gained momentum, with Deputy President William Ruto openly declaring his interest in the seat.
Hakuna mtu atapatiwa tikiti ya Jubilee bila ya contest. Kila mtu. Hakuna automatic ticket kwa mtu yeyote.
But that bid has been met with opposition from leaders, seemingly emboldened by President Kenyatta's criticism of early campaigns.
Serikali kama mnaunda na Uhuru, wewe unachukua mkate nusu na Uhuru anachukua nusu yake. Alafu unarudisha mkate mwingine unatolewa wapi?
President Kenyatta says the early campaigns risk ruining his legacy ahead of 2022.
Siasa ya kusema ati kwa sababu mtu ametoka pahali fulani ati kusema maendeleo itaelekezwa pahali fulani. We want a country where every single citizen is entitled to development regardless of where the leader comes from. Hiyo ndio siasa tunataka Kenya hii. Kwa hivyo hawa washenzi wawachane na mimi.
The head of state has in fact on many occasions warned leaders against rocking the party from within, statements that have been met with defiance from within, with some leaders asking him to take a stand on the succession and the political debt debate as one way of calming the storm in the ruling party.
Hii mambo kazi yetu ni kupiga kura. Baada ya kupiga kura, maendeleo tunapatiana kwingine. Hiyo ujinga tuache.
Leaders allied to Deputy President William Ruto are also of the view that the bromance between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM's Raila Odinga has driven a wedge between the former brothers in arms, isolating the Deputy President to the cold fringe. Some also say it's a move calculated to block the Deputy President's 2022 ambitions. The ODM leader has been pushing for a change in the constitution to change the governance structure, much to the chagrin of the Deputy President and his lieutenant. And while Kenyatta has been guarded on whether he would support the popular vote, his statements in Kisumu last month left many surprised. And while it may be too early to predict what the future holds for the party, commentators now say that the days, weeks and months ahead could make or break the party, depending on the actions of its leadership. Silas Apollo, NTV.
Right, elsewhere now, opposition leader Raila Odinga has condemned the judiciary for being quick in granting bail to suspects facing corruption and other severe charges, including murder.
Odinga says the move to release such suspects on bail has enabled them to intimidate witnesses and interfere with evidence in the ongoing cases, making the judiciary appear to be the weak link in the war on corruption.
Is the judiciary participating fully in this war? When the culprits have been arrested, culprits have been, evidence has been taken to court, then they're given bail and they're able to go back to work, and they're being treated as angels who are just being molested by society. You're accused of some of the worst crimes, murder, most foul, and you're allowed to go back and work and fire people, interfere with evidence. Is the judiciary an ally in the war against corruption?
A middle-aged man was killed in Likia Molo area, sparking day-long protests that led to rising tension in the area.
The man was stabbed to death as he went after stolen goats and sheep. NTV's Brenda Wanga reports that security agents are urging for calm as they investigate the incident further.
The two leaders, the current Molo MP and her predecessor, had come to ground zero of the clashes in Molo to try and calm the situation, but their mission ended up with the opposite effect. They almost came to fist fights, with the current MP Charity Gadhambi accusing the former Joseph Kiuna of being behind the latest bout of violence in the area.
Mheshimiwa Kiuna atatueleza kwa nini alijua wiki tatu kutakuwa na maafa na
lakini tunajuana kwa vilemba. All is not well.
The two leaders scuffle occasioned by the night killing of 35-year-old James Minor as he pursued some sheep and goats that had been stolen from the area. He was stabbed in the stomach and neck by the rustlers as they fled with the animals. Residents believe that the livestock rustlers also attacked the deceased neighbor's homestead in the wee hours of the morning and made away with a number of goats and sheep. The area residents, angered by the attack and the murder of their own, staged protests and blockaded roads using stones and tree branches. In some instances, they set the branches on fire, rendering sections of the Njoro Mount Narok Road impassable. Tension remained high in the area for the better part of the day as police investigate the killing to determine whether the attack was a normal rustling incident or if there could be more to this than meets the eye. Brenda Wanga, NTV.
Police in Homa Bay have arrested 6 people suspected to have been part of the gang that attacked a 13-year-old teenager last Thursday. The suspects were arrested last evening in Homa Bay town.
Police are still pursuing crucial leads and are anticipating more arrests. The 13-year-old girl was defiled and her private parts mutilated, and she's now been moved to Nairobi for expert medical attention.
She will be attended to at the Nairobi Women's Hospital at the intervention of the State Department of Gender and Social Services.
The move is aimed at ensuring that she gets the much-needed advanced care by a team of experts who hope to reconstruct her reproductive parts that had been mutilated in the horrific attack.
All right, and of course we hope that all goes well with that procedure. In other news, the consignment of bad maize imported from Mozambique in November 2017 will be destroyed by burning in a process expected to take at least 3 weeks.
10 containers of the grain that was unfit for human consumption were transported to the Bamburi cement kiln for destruction.
Now, the owner had planned to sneak the over 201 containers into the market by selling it to the local millers at a throwaway price.
Kevin Mutai has more.
10 lorries ferrying some of the containers with bags of bad maize from a container freight station belonging to Consul Base Limited in Changamwe were escorted under tight security to Bamburi Cement for the destruction of the grain. The 201 containers that were lying at the CFS station contained tons of bad maize imported into the country from Mozambique through the port of Mombasa in 2017. The consignment, worth millions of shillings, had been imported by a South African company, Mahindra and Mahindra, and will be destroyed by burning.
Our capacity, we can do at least 1 container per day, but that depends with the performance of the kiln, which can increase to more than 1 container.
The 40-feet containers, each carrying hundreds of rotten maize, were nabbed by detectives from the Special Crimes Prevention Unit when the owner was allegedly planning to sneak it to the market. The Kenya Bureau of Standards tested the samples of the grain and revealed that the product tested positive for aflatoxin. It had been rejected and declared unfit for human consumption, and the owners were directed to destroy the consignment.
It was tested by our organization and it failed to comply with the KSES 2. It failed in aflatoxin, heavily infested with pests, rotten, smelly, discolored.
NTV last year reported on the investigations uncovered by detectives and discovered a chain of farms both in the country and in Mozambique that colluded to import and store the maize for more than a year. Now the grain will be destroyed in a process expected to take at least 3 weeks, and the owner of the consignment will cover the costs.
We expect the remainder of 191 containers also to follow up. Maybe in the next 20 days, like it has been said by my colleague, we expect that destruction to be complete, and then we'll be through with this activity.
The owner of the maize had been negotiating with millers to buy the grain at a throwaway price. Kevin Mutai, NTV, Mombasa.
What greed can lead people to do in this country. Yeah. A police officer in Cheptai sub-county within Bungoma County has been accused of assaulting a 13-year-old boy on Tuesday over claims he stole his mobile phone.
According to the victim's father, the officer, who was allegedly drunk, confronted the boy on his way home from the market. The teenager was expected to report for Form 1 at the Kuria Boys High School, but now will have to skip school to seek treatment.
Residents claim it's not the only case of police officers attacking members of the public. They want the police inspector general to crack the whip on what they claim are rogue officers.
All right, on that note, let's take a breather on NTV tonight, but of course stay with us, there's plenty more to come.
Thank you for staying with us. The high cost of healthcare remains a bitter pill to swallow for many Kenyans, and experts in the pharmaceutical field are applauding the push towards widespread use of generic drugs.
Players in the pharmaceutical field are now appealing to the Pharmacy and Poisons Board to continue flexing its muscle on regulation to ensure quality. Eunice Omolo reports.
Expensive medicines is a major contributor to the skyrocketing cost of healthcare in Kenya, hence the recent move towards generic drugs.
Generics are good. They drive down the cost of healthcare. However, we must be very sure that the board, through what is called post-market surveillance and pharmacovigilance, they continuously check the quality of these drugs.
But there's been a misconception about the difference between the originator, commonly referred to as original in Kenya, and the generic.
Generic drug is the same. It has the same active ingredient as the originator drug, which means if we have a brand and a generic, let's say for diabetes, both of them should work the same way. Okay? Both of them should work the same way. Now, generics tend to be cheaper because they do not have, the production of a generic does not have to undergo all the processes of drug production, clinical trials, manufacture and marketing. That's why they tend to be cheaper and more cost effective as opposed to the brand drug, which is the originator drug, and you have to bear the costs of production of that drug.
It takes an innovator about 10 to 15 years to lift off a drug from patent and allow its formulation to be lifted for generics.
As the debate on the use of generic drugs rages on, biting some health professionals and insurance companies, what lingers in the minds of many Kenyans is whether in the move to ensure availability of quality and cost-effective drugs, the body relevant will cushion Kenyans against unscrupulous dealers bringing in counterfeit drugs in the name of cheap drugs.
So the Pharmacy and Poisons Board is the only body in Kenya mandated to register medicines in Kenya. So no medicine is in Kenya without the knowledge of the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. Yeah. So what the Pharmacy and Poisons Board does is, someone who wants to bring in medicine to Kenya has to do an application. The application is then given into a dossier. You have to say, what is this medicine for? If it's an innovator medicine, what is it for? If it's a generic, what copy is it for? Yeah, and what are the clinical trials? What is the research? So I can assure Kenyans, any medicine with a registration from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board is fit to be in this country.
The push for dispensing of generic drugs could relieve the burden of cost to people on private insurance.
People to take these expensive drugs and then their cover ends in a period of 3 months. They find themselves 9 months down the line, they don't have a cover because their cover is already exhausted because of the cost of those drugs. So even as a person, I would give advice that go for the generic drugs if they are working for you.
Eunice Omolo, NTV, Nairobi.
Now, Nairobi County Public Health officers destroyed dog and game meat recovered in a house in Kilimani.
Hope our viewers have already finished dinner. The court today visited the apartment in Kilimani that housed the Chinese nationals who were arrested in possession of wildlife trophies and game meat.
Now, 4 suspects will remain in custody until the 14th of January when the case comes up for a mention. NTV's Mel Miendo is staying with that story.
House number 6 at the Aberdare Court's Kilimani estate has been a crime scene for the past 3 days after police found a revolting discovery inside. 3 Chinese nationals and a Kenyan were arrested for being in possession of dog and game meat and a number of wildlife trophies. Senior Principal Magistrate Kennedy Cheriot, accompanied by officials from relevant authorities, were today at the crime scene on a truth-finding mission. After the open court session, public health officials were allowed to dispose of the contaminated meat.
We pray to be allowed to dispose of the items as enumerated in our application. Subject to what I said in court. We're not opposed to the application.
4 suspects are currently detained at the Kilimani police station and have been charged for being in possession of leopard skin, rhino horns, ivory bangles and necklaces, which are valued at 6.3 million shillings. Appearing today at the Milimani Law Courts, one of the detainees, Shang Li Yan, through her defense lawyer Asa Nyakundi, denied preparing and cooking the contaminated meat, but the prosecution opposed her release on bond. A court session has been carried out here at the Aberdare Courts, house number 6, where actually it has been said that for over 12 years, Chinese nationals have been living in this specific house. All the meat that has been stored here will now be dumped at the Dandora dump site. Mel Miendo, NTV, Kilimani.
Let's take you to El Hadi village in Dukana ward in North Horr constituency, where tens of families there are staring at losses running into millions of shillings after about 100 of their camels died.
The camels died after drinking from a shallow well, and experts have taken samples from the well for testing.
Gabra herders can do nothing but stare at the carcasses of their animals, and the Kenya Camel Association says the loss incurred by the villagers could top 30 million shillings. Their losses could rise if the calves left behind by the dead mothers were to succumb. The herders say the animals started showing signs of trouble a few days ago when they were unable to pass urine, while many were too weak and lay down for long hours during the day.
And these communities, they keep on using shallow wells, hand-dug wells, for all these years. Some of these wells were dug a long time ago, some 40, 50, 60 years ago.
Residents are waiting to know what killed their animals, with water samples having been taken for testing.
We are afraid more and more animals are going to perish in the coming days, because unless those boreholes are repaired, for sure these animals have to drink, and they'll be drinking this contaminated water.
North Horr Member of Parliament Chachu Ganya says he is working with relevant authorities to bring help to the affected families. The residents are urgently calling for alternative sources of water.
There is so much livestock concentration, and so unless both boreholes are fully functional and water bowsers are provided, the crisis the crisis is likely to exacerbate and cause more harm. More than that, even the families who have lost now their livelihood, because this livestock, the camels, which are now over 115, and hundreds of goats that have died.
Back at the villages, orphaned calves cry out for mother's milk, and with the threat of starvation, some families are being forced to move to neighboring communities where they hope to find lactating camels to adopt the orphaned calves. Of the 115 camels that have died, 95 belong to Yagara village, where over 300 households have been affected, and 20 from the El Hadi trading center. An additional 30 goats and sheep have also died after consuming the water. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
Okay, go ahead.
It is 1:30, and time for another breather. The business news is up next, and Mark will be leading that agenda.
Time for Biashara. The growing impatience with how the elites are accumulating wealth at the expense of the majority poor could lead to the tipping point where the rich are compelled to have part of their wealth address social concerns. The Ford Foundation's president, Darren Walker, says the have-nots have the right to demand that some of the wealth that they have helped generate, which is in the hands of the rich, should be channeled towards tackling societal challenges. Lilian Kiarie reports on some of the ideas that came up to tackle financial inequality in East Africa.
According to data from the Kenya Integrated Household Budget Survey, nearly 60% of the country's wealth is in the hands of a fifth of Kenya's population. The survey report released last year found that a fifth of Nairobi residents own 86.4% of wealth in the capital, while 40% of residents at the bottom of the income pyramid control a mere 0.4% of total expenditure.
WEB.
Speaking at a public forum at the University of Nairobi, where the Ford Foundation unveiled a plaque commemorating 56 years of partnership with the university, the foundation's president, Darren Walker, had this to say about the current state of inequality globally.
There is growing impatience with we elites and with aggregators of wealth sitting on billions of dollars. And the public is asking, what are you doing for us? And the public has a right to ask the question, how are you investing to not harm the planet, to do good in society with your investments?
The world has gone digital, and with the bulk of the population in many African countries being the youth, the need to invest in training the future generation of leaders in IT skills was cited as paramount.
A young orphan in Mamboleo that has to work and take care of her younger siblings and may not be able to make it to the class does need to be left behind. With adequate access to internet, she too can study in her free time and be given the opportunity to learn. The wheels of government may take time, but technology is fast and the right tools can bridge the gap.
Globally, the rich continue to get richer and the poor poorer as governments grapple with the challenge of putting in place policies that will ensure that wealth is distributed more evenly.
Development is good for everyone.
During the forum, the Ford Foundation's boss announced that it will give a grant of 40 million shillings to the University of Nairobi to refurbish Taifa Hall, among other developments. Lilian Kiarie, NTV Business.
President Uhuru Kenyatta has directed the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture to authorize the National and Cereals Produce Board to immediately open buying centers and stores to receive maize from farmers across the country. In line with this, the Strategic Food Reserve has been authorized to purchase 2 million 90-kilogram bags of maize at 2,500 shillings per bag. The directive comes as maize farmers bear the brunt of delayed payments that have upset their financial status in the new year. President Kenyatta says the country experienced a bumper harvest last year of 46 million bags, with 2.5 million bags having been carried over from 2017. He further says that an audit by the Ministry of Agriculture, which he ordered 6 months ago to identify genuine farmers who deserve to be paid, is complete, and that all that is left now is for the farmers to get paid. Kenya loses upwards of R1 trillion shillings to corruption every year, and the vice, even with a concerted effort to eliminate it, is still alive and kicking. Private sector leaders are proposing a new model of tackling corruption, which continues to rob Kenya's economy of jobs, growth and peace of mind. Julian Amboko reports on how the multi-sectoral initiative against corruption plans to step up the fight against the same.
Official statistics indicate that Kenya loses up to 30% of its budget to corruption, undermining service delivery, improvement of the business environment and robbing millions of a stable future. The multi-sectoral initiative against corruption now says that tailoring anti-corruption strategies at a sectoral level is the best way to mitigate the impact of corruption on Kenya's economy.
The different sectors I've talked about earlier were mobilized to develop anti-corruption strategies through a self-introspection process. looking internally to each sector as to how they actually do corruption there.
The initiative draws membership from stakeholders across various sectors and seeks to boost the private sector's and ordinary citizens' participation in the fight against corruption. The initiative's leaders say that it is imperative that the private sector is held to equally high standards as are demanded of the public sector in the fight against corruption.
One of the roles of holding everybody to account, whether it's judiciary, whether it is executive, whether it's legislature, if you are going to hold people accountable, you can't do that if you yourself are carrying baggages or, engaging in corrupt practices.
The multi-sectoral initiative against corruption is set to hold the National Anti-Corruption Conference in Nairobi later this month, through which the various sector strategies will be tabled and assessed. Currently, there is concern that high-profile corruption cases in the courts are proceeding at a glacial pace, with chances high that the perpetrators of the vice who are out on bail will eventually walk out scot-free owing to a weak judicial system. Julian's Amboko, NTV.
Well, here's some good news. Well, just for Consolidated Bank's bondholders who have a reason to smile this January at a time when many are stretching the shilling in their pockets to reach the next paycheck. The bank has announced that it will pay the 13th interest on its corporate bond on the 21st of this month. The payment will be done to bondholders whose names appear on the company's register at the close of business, on the 11th of January 2019. At more than 13%, the interest rate on the bond will give the investors a healthy return at a critical time of the year financially, given the heavy spending associated with the holiday season. Thank you for allowing me to mind your business for the last few minutes. That's it from the Business Desk. Welcome back. Now, just days after President Uhuru Kenyatta launched a multi-million shilling project to give Mama Ngina Drive in Mombasa a facelift, the National Lands Commission says most of the land has been grabbed. Chairman Mohammed Swazuri claims that 13 people have grabbed 20 acres, leaving only 6 for the public. President Kenyatta directed the NLC to repossess the grabbed land.
The total was 26. 20 has been hived off or illegally allocated. 6 has not been illegally allocated. But the public have access to all of it, except that for 2 plots, the purported allottees have put up walls amounting to about 2.3 acres, which the public are not able to access. So, as per the Constitution of Kenya and the Land Act and the National Land Commission Act, Land Registration Act, this is public utility land. that cannot be allocated to private individuals.
And let's take you across the borders now.